Hello from snowy Virginia. We had a snowstorm last night and it's still going on right now. And so it's cold here and I'm just staying home all day. And today's topic for the video is going to be on something we've all been talking about for the last few weeks, the transition from GEDmatch to GEDmatch Genesis. And I want to specifically discuss how the changes or the differences between GEDmatch Genesis and GEDmatch affect DNA reconstruction, since that's really what my niche is all about here. Okay, so I'm logged into GEDmatch Genesis, and if you notice, it's 100% done with the migration, and that's nice because that's been going on for a long time, and it's good to see that finally come to an end, and we could jump right into using Genesis. So let's take a look at my kits, what's migrated. We got some real kits, we got some research kits, we got some capital R and lowercase r research kits. The lowercase r are ones that were created with the GEDmatch tools, like the Lazarus tool or the phasing tool. And then we got some Genesis kits that I updated, or that I uploaded myself. And we've got some kits that I did not want to migrate. For example, I've got 3 versions of John Paragoy Smith there, and I will kill some of those because um, they must have been marked for migration, even though I deleted them on the classic GEDmatch side. And I guess they're deleting a kit on GEDmatch, on classic GEDmatch, does not affect its status on the Genesis side. So I may have created John Paragoy Smith and then erased him, and then created a better version, and then erased that one, and then created an even better version on the classic GEDmatch, and the migration migrated them all. So I've got some first thing I've got to do is I've got to do some cleanup, but I'm not going to do that on the camera. And you can now get your GEDcoms below too, and you can click on that, and let's see if it functions the same way as the classic GEDmatch. Yes, and you see all those DNA symbols there are DNA kits that I uploaded that I reconstructed some of my ancestors. Um, so that looks like it's working nicely. So now let's go beyond whether things are working and the migration itself, and let's take a look at some of these tools that they have on GEDmatch and for the purpose of reconstruction, or that affect our reconstruction workflows in Borland Genetics, and let's see what has changed and how that's going to affect us. Let's start out with their native reconstruction tools. Um, let's start out with, where is the Lazarus tool? I don't really know where anything is yet, but I found it. Okay, so name of the individual the kit represents, comment or description. That's nice that you can put a description. Uh, Same options as far as processing. You could do a trial run. You could do batch processing, and you can have it so it's used with one-to-many. I'm assuming that the threshold is still 1,500 centimorgans, unless they change that, but I have not heard otherwise. This is new. Group 0. They used to have a row, and people said it was non-functional. I have no idea if it was functional or not, where you could put in a spouse. So the idea is you put in the spouse of your target, and it would do something like my missing parent, or not my missing parent, but my both parent phasing, my 2-parent phasing tool would do, where it will increase the resolution of the output using, because it'll be able to less ambiguously phase if you put in the information about a spouse. And here they've expanded that so you could use, instead of the whole spouse, you could microphase using the spouse's relatives. And I think that's a nice addition. Haven't actually tried it, but assuming it works, then I think that's a nice addition to the Lazarus tool. Group 1 looks exactly the same. There's 10 positions there. And group 2 used to go up to 100, still goes up to 100. So Lazarus is looking good. So let us, my biggest complaint, or not complaint, but I didn't like about the Lazarus was that you have to input each of these 100 kits separately, manually, I mean, rather. And you can cut and paste or use a macro or something in Excel, but you really have to paste in the names of these 100 kits. And I want to see, I believe they may have changed that. And where they would have changed that would be, let's see, I'm just going to do a one-to-many. I'm going to use the tier 1 one-to-many, and I'll get back to that in a minute. I see there are 2 tier 1 one-to-manys now. Well, pick one. And I'm going to put in my kit number. You can't just hit enter, you have to hit search. Forgot about that. Okay, so I believe that you may be allowed now 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I haven't actually tried this, but I heard it through the grapevine. That I select some kits and I can go to visualization options and Lazarus, and it'll automatically populate. Beautiful, isn't it? That's what I've been asking for a while, and my wish has been granted here. So I'm very happy about that improvement to the Lazarus kit. The Lazarus tool, it looks like there are 2 major improvements that'll really make this a better tool for reconstruction, and I'm very happy about that. Okay, so now let's take a look at the phasing tool, because that's one of the other most common tools that we use for phasing. Again, I don't know where anything is, but this looks like it here, phasing. Okay, so this looks exactly the same. We've got the drop downs, and we can pick me, we can pick my father if I wanted to, but my list is so long he's hard to find. Put my my mother in there and generate. All right, and it generated the kit very quickly. And it gave the same type of output numbers. So before, I don't know if this has been fixed, and I guess we'll have to test it, or maybe somebody can answer in the comments. With the regular classic GEDmatch phasing utility, there was an error in the way that it handled the same parent side of the phasing. So like my paternal, I use my mom to do this. So my paternal phase kit is going to be looking perfect, and it's going to behave just the way I want it to. But in the old version, the maternal copy, or the maternal phased output kit, had a glitch where it had too many segments. Okay, back to the main menu. You see we also have the My Evil Twin, which it says is beta, but that's been working great for a while in the classic GEDmatch. I assume it's still working fine here. And it's got very similar options, and what you can do is either create your paternal evil twin, your maternal evil twin, or your complete evil twin. The paternal and maternal evil twins are what are interesting for reverse phasing, my reverse phasing process. So you could either do that here, or you could do that on my tools, generating evil twins. And the advantage to doing them on my tools is that I don't think GEDmatch allows you to download them. So if you create them with third-party tools, you could actually store them on your computer, assuming that you have the raw DNA for the parent and child. Let's just do a simple one-to-one comparison, because I want to show you some things that have changed. One-to-one autosomal, and there's a one-to-one xDNA comparison. Let's take a look at me versus my brother. So same thing, you could pick graphics and position, position only or graphic only. We'll leave it to graphics and position. This is nice. Now you can switch between build 36, build 37, and build 38 as your coordinate system, and it will give you the output coordinates in whichever you choose. So old classic GEDmatch always gave everything in build 36, which was kind of outdated compared to what the format of the actual DNA kits that GEDmatch takes primarily for input, which are build 37 from Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage. Those are all a build 37 kits, the raw data files are reported in build 37. So now it's nice that you could just directly use those coordinates. And for things like DNA painting, chromosome mapping, you could now easily mix and match from, say, the segment output from MyHeritage with the segment output from GEDmatch Genesis if you pick B37, and there won't be any issues as far as any offsets or anything like that when you're trying to figure out whether segments are overlapping or not, or fully overlapping, or where the endpoints are. So that's a great improvement to GEDmatch Genesis, and I'm really happy that's in there. Let's see. I would like to see maybe in the future, and I don't know if this will ever happen, a button like they have down here now. You have some new options like show the FIR, prevent hard breaks. I would like to see a button that says include X chromosome. That would be a nice addition, I think, to this, and it would obviate the need for the second separate X chromosome tool if they did that. But I have no idea if they will or they won't. That's just something I would personally like, and I may be the only person in the world that would be interested in that. But so you could set the SNP threshold, and this is interesting. Look at the way it's worded here. Leave blank for the default to vary dynamically between 200 and 400. Now the old classic GEDmatch let you choose your SNP threshold, but the default was not dynamic. The default was, I believe, 700. And a lot of times I would take that down to 500 when there were overlap issues between across different companies. But here, it defaults as a dynamic value, or not dynamic value. It varies dynamically across the chromosomes based on some equation between 200 and 400. And my understanding is that equation was based on some scientific evidence as far as what SNP overlap or how SNP overlap would be likely or unlikely to screw up a match calculation, right? So I've tried it out, and I haven't really had any issues with the dynamic, although sometimes you'll see something show up in your one-to-many list, and you'll wonder why it doesn't show up on a one-to-one, and it might be because the portion where you match when searched dynamically may be searching for 400 SNPs and it's only 300. So you lower it to 300, and then all of a sudden you see that you match on the one-to-one as well. And I'm not recommending always lowering these settings. I mean, I think they chose the dynamic SNP threshold for a very good reason. I don't know how fine-tuned that is, and I don't know how whether it's a done deal or whether they're still making modifications to it or still adjusting. But I think that's really necessary for handling the 23andMe version 5 kits, which have very little overlap with some of the other companies. So I think that's a very clever way to handle it, and I hope it seems like it's working as far as my kits go. I think it's working quite well. But if you see something weird, then maybe just try to adjust that and force it to choose a static SNP threshold versus the dynamic one, and see if that resolves the problem, maybe if you can't find where you match someone on your match list. Okay, and then the segment size, same as before, default is 7, and the size in SNPs, it defaults to half of the SNP count. Now, okay, these are two new things, and these are excellent. Show only full match segments, FIR segments. So you could see the FIR segments before in the old Genesis. They show up in green, right? But when you show only here, what's nice is, let's submit. It still looks the same, but they give you the coordinates of where those begin and end. Before, you would only get the HIR coordinates, and now you can use these coordinates, and you could use them for things like my pseudo-sibling workflow, and this is going to be something that you can copy and paste into my new web tool that's going to automate some of the visual phasing process. And the last thing are these hard breaks. I am personally not a fan of hard breaks. Ancestry.com is also a fan of hard breaks, and I believe they use that in assessing the validity of a match. And okay, I can see that for assessing the validity of a match. This could be useful because um, for some areas of the chromosome, whether or not you match over those areas suggests nothing about the degree of relationship. And if all you care about is the degree of relationship, I think maybe that's useful. However, for DNA reconstruction, that's not all we care about. We care about exactly where our kits match each other so that we can reconstruct those blocks or assign those blocks and segments to the proper phase. So whenever we use this for reconstruction purposes, which is pretty much all the time for me, that's mainly what I use GEDmatch for, then I have to click that. We'll have to click prevent hard breaks, and we're going to have to remember to click that every time. Okay, back to the menu, and let's try out, I got to try this out because it says the word revolutionary next to it. The Q matching 1-to-1. So we click on that, and let's just compare, I don't know, me to my brother. I don't care which build because we're not going to be mapping. I'm just going to take a look and see what this does. Precision, leave blank for 30. SNP density. Okay, so it's going to show some different types of graphs. Let's submit. So for each matching segment I have with my brother, it is giving a quality of that segment. I guess it's making an assessment as how likely it is that that segment is actually IBD. So looks like you got a lot of good Q numbers. Although I'm not honestly not 100% sure what a good Q number would be as opposed to a bad Q number. That one's pretty low there. It's 241 versus 3,700. So I'm going to say that's qualitatively a worse Q number. But to be honest, I have no idea how we're going to apply this to DNA reconstruction, and I'd like to see some better documentation of this and what is this Q all about, other than a heuristic sense that it's a higher quality with a higher number Q. I'd like to know a little more about that before I rely on any of this for DNA reconstruction. And I hope that they put out some good literature on that on GEDmatch's end, so we know what we're dealing with. I also noticed something here, and this scares me quite a bit. You can specify segment thresholds and centimorgans down to 1 centimorgan. And that is, sometimes you need to do that, but not for assessing the validity of a match. So it kind of scares me that that says that on a page dedicated to assessing the quality of matches, because I would never lower the centimorgans to 1. So if you do so, you set the precision parameter higher, otherwise you'll get false matches. But I would think that with 1 centimorgan, they should all be false matches. So I would be extremely careful in lowering the threshold until I saw some more clear documentation on how this tool works. I'm not saying it's not a valuable tool. I just don't understand it yet, and I'm not really sure how this applies to DNA reconstruction, if at all. But I hope to learn more about this in the future. Oh, look, they do have a link, actually, to instructions. I did not notice that before. But still, it looks very heuristic in nature as far as larger Q values indicate segments that are more supported by evidence. But it doesn't say what a good Q is or what a bad Q is or any statistics on what Q level is likely to be IBD. And I'd like to see some better documentation of that before I start using this. Okay, so that takes us to possibly the most important tool for DNA reconstruction that's in the GEDmatch arsenal, and that is the matching segment tool. It was a tier 1 tool in classic GEDmatch. It remains a tier 1 tool in the new GEDmatch Genesis, and it just has a slightly different name. It is no longer the matching segment tool. It is the segment search tool, but this is basically at its heart the very same tool. So let's take a kit. I want to go back here for a second. I'm going to look at one of those John Smiths because that's going to make it run quickly because I think that has a very small reconstruction coverage. Uh, Here's one. I think this is the most recent version. My ancestor John Smith, who was born 1822, doesn't have a lot of segments reconstructed, so this should run quickly. Again, you could pick the build to display. This will dynamically calculate, you do the same thing with the dynamically calculated SNP threshold. Um, I'm going to set it to 500 on this. Segment size, that's fine. Um, Chromosome to scan, all. And what's missing from here is the remove hard breaks, if you remember. That is in the other one-to-one type, or that's in the one-to-one type tools. I don't know if this is going to include hard breaks or if this is going to prevent hard breaks. And maybe maybe GEDmatch, someone at GEDmatch can give me the answer to that, or somebody in my group. We have a lot of people in my reconstruction Borland Genetics users group that like to do experiments like this and could maybe figure out on their own and report back to us on whether or not these hard breaks are prevented in this tool or not. Show graphic bar. I always choose no, and that hasn't changed because it makes it so much easier to copy and paste into Excel. And what we're going to do in the future is copy and paste into my web-based tool for visual phasing purposes. And I'll probably allow either to be copy and pasted in, and it'll just erase the graphic if you forget. So, but it saves a ton of time if you remove that graphic bar when you're exporting these to Excel. Not to saying the graphic is not useful, it's just not useful for the purpose that I use this tool for. It gets in the way. So submit, but no matter because you can just kill it. So yeah, there's only 81 matching kits. That didn't take long at all. And these are all likely descendants, maybe some cousins of Obadiah Holmes. Um, so everything looks about the same, right? This is just like our old matching segment tool. It's sorted by chromosome, and then it's sorted in order of position. And as you can see, there's only a couple segments that were actually reconstructed here on chromosomes 7 and 8. So that's why it ran so quickly. Otherwise, you have to sit and wait a bit. But what's nice now, too, is that if this is a phased kit, if I wanted to create a Lazarus kit, let's say I discovered that, only that first segment from 30 to 52 belonged to Obadiah Holmes' father, and it came from Obadiah Holmes' father, whereas maybe the other one came from his mother, and I wanted to separate them into Lazarus kits. I could do the same thing. I can click on the multi-kit analysis. I'll do it in a separate window, and it does not let me, visualization options. Here we go. Must choose at least 3 kits. Try that again. So let's just pick 3 random kits that are on that segment, on that chromosome 7. And let's do multi-kit analysis, visualization options, and bam, takes you right to Lazarus. And as group 2, it puts those in, and for group 1, I would simply put Obadiah Holmes itself. Interestingly, it put Obadiah Holmes in group 1, I think. C11. Yes, that was not one of the kits I selected. So just be careful if you use the Lazarus tool like this. You have to move it to group 1, and I think you probably have to fill that gap, but I don't know. But anyway, this would reconstruct or give you a Lazarus kit with only the desired segment. So it's kind of neat how you can now sort of make these Fisher-Price type Lazarus kits by using the matching segment tool. So that's kind of cool. And it looks like the matching segment tool, with the possible exception of the hard break issue, is just as useful as it ever was for all of the third-party type of tools like mine for for reconstruction as well. It looks like the output's in exactly the same format. I mean, the headings changed a little bit, but no big deal. Looking good. Okay, so some general issues that I just wanted to talk about that aren't specifically about a one specific tool. One of those is compatibility. And I've seen there are some issues because this is new technology. You know, things have changed, and there's always some growing pains. There are issues with compatibility with some third-party tools that are problematic, but I'm sure those will be worked out by the inventors of those tools. I know Stephen Fox is hard at work getting his tool to be GEDmatch Genesis to accept data from there, and I'm sure it'll be a matter of no time. And also, I know there was some issue with the Matchbox or Matchbook. What are they called? Where a lot of the Facebook groups have these spreadsheets where you can paste in your match list, and it'll show you a list of people within the Facebook group. Like, let's say it's the Lithuanian genealogy group, and you paste that in there, it'll show you your matches to people in the group. It'll check the group membership for you on Facebook, and that's a really cool tool. I think he might have already fixed that, but I'm not sure that the fixed version is being used by all of the Facebook groups that used to use the old version, so I think they need to switch over. Okay, so before I give you a tool or explain to you a tool that will be useful for getting you through this transition, in some cases, I did want to cover one more thing, and that's when down here on the generic uploads, and this is this is what you would use to upload regular DNA kits, synthetic DNA kits, and DNA obtained from an artifact. So I'm excited about that, and so Genesis is fully anticipating being able to process and compare and analyze kits from artifacts. And that, I think, is going to be really, really useful for DNA reconstruction. I mean, some of my tools, like the reverse phase, allow you to reconstruct grandparents from a parent and child. But what if those parent and child were people that lived 100 years ago? Then we're talking about, reconstructing their parents. So the types of workflows and uh, the extent of the ability to reconstruct farther and farther back is going to be really out of control with the introduction of artifact DNA to the database. And I'm really happy that they are accepting it, and I like what I see there. So I said I would give you a tool, or it's a tool that I already have in my toolkit, but I am going to explain really quickly how it can be used to help with the GEDmatch transition in addressing the overlap issue. If you are like me, you may have tested with multiple testing companies, and my toolkit allows you to combine those results. So let's open up Borland Genetics version 2.1. If you're using an older version of my software, please go to the Dropbox and download the new version. It's still free. All of my tools are free, and it's got some new features and some improvements, and I've worked out a couple glitches that may have been in previous versions, so it's important that you have the most recent version. But what we're going to do is the Humpty Dumpty tool. Although first I have to load my resources, and I'm going to go to Manage Resources, and I'm going to load a resource list because I think I already created a list for this, and that is just Kevin various templates, okay? So now what I'm going to do, back to the main menu, and I'm going to show you could use my Humpty Dumpty tool. Option 3, well, option 0 is return to the main menu, but as far as the 3 substantive options, this is the third one that you want to use. Merge complete mono or stereo resources from the same donor to a single kit. And I put on the bottom as a tip, if you wish to merge 2 kits from different testing companies, choose the third option. So let's do that, and let's select, I don't know, my Ancestry version 1 kit, and I've got some here that are my own templates and things like that. And let's select my 23andMe version 4. This will also work with the version 5 kits. The only brand of kit that I've seen any recently someone reported an issue with this tool, was with living DNA, but I haven't had a chance to really investigate that. And the complaint was not that it didn't work, but rather that they uh, were curious about why the matches were different from that of another of just the living DNA kit. So I haven't beta tested living DNA. I don't have any kits from that company, but it should work for all the major companies and all versions of their tests. So hit select, and what's it going to do? It's going to run a merge same script, is what I called it, and it's going to load the DNA resources. Here, there's two DNA resources, and it's going to convert the templates to a combined template with all of the SNPs that were tested by either kit, and then it's going to populate the data on those templates with a combination of information from both of those kits. So it's going to be a true merge, a lossless merge between those two different versions of my DNA. And why you want to do this? I see a lot of people say, "Oh, if you've got more than one, make sure one's private." And then people say, "Well, which one do I make private?" Well, I say if you've tested with more than one company, make them all private, or research kits. And instead, for your real kit that you're going to be using for comparisons, use use a combined, a merge, Humpty Dumpty option 3 merge. That way, you don't run into as much of the overlap issues. I mean, the more SNPs that you have in your file, the less likely you're going to have a low sampling, a low overlap situation, and the more you can trust your DNA matches. So even those small, 7 centimorgan matches are more likely to be accurate if you have more data points between the beginning and end of that 7 centimorgan span. So that's what merging the DNA kits does, because it'll take the set of SNPs sampled by the one testing companies and add those SNPs to the SNPs sampled by the other testing company, and you get in some situations a lot more overlap with the general universe of kits that are out there on Genesis. Now that there's a lot more different types of kits you'll be comparing against. Um, and in particular, if you tested with 23andMe version 5, it's really good to combine that to merge it with an older kit that you've done, like if you've tested with MyHeritage or Ancestry or something. The big source of the overlap issue were those 23andMe version 5 kits. So if you can eliminate all of the overlap issues if you test it with both companies. Just merge them together. You can make your real kits private and have your Borland Genetics Humpty Dumpty kit be your public kit. And then you just save here, and you could upload it just the way I showed you a minute ago with the generic upload. And that's it for today. That is a wrap for episode 14, and we'll have some new things to talk about next week. You have a good weekend, and hopefully the snow will stop soon here, and I'll be able to get to work tomorrow.